innocent. I've been waiting for the days like this, a lot so, but also when I say like this, when parents son making money on some rave ass shit, no, it's only a text, it feels amazing, yeah. When the sun shines on my face, let's play with it all day, at the fun times come my way, I'm taking them so great. When the sun shines on my face, let's play with it all day, at the fun times come my way, I'm taking them so great. I kinda know what you mean, it's never just what it seems. I gotta get to there just to find out it's only the beginning. Walking through this world, I seem to fall in love with everyone I meet, but at the end of every road, it's always just you and me. It's always just you and me. I go too slow, then I speed up. I talk too much, then not enough. I overthink, then not at all. I think too much about it. I go too slow, then I speed up. I talk too much, then not enough. I overthink, then not at all. Don't think too much about it. The sunshine on my face, let's play with it all day, at the fun times come my way, I'm taking them so great. When the sunshine on my face, let's play with it all day, at the fun times come my way, I'm taking them so great. When the ultimately, I don't understand a thing. I try to do the best I can. I know you try to do the same. We're just so bound to make mistakes. You could call it a disposition. I apologize for all your tears. I wish I could be different, but I'm still growing up into the one you can call your love. I don't know if I'll ever be enough. I'm throwing in my chips, I guess I tend to push my luck. And ultimately I believe we'll be okay. It's so cliche to say these things, but repetition is a key. I think I'm better when I'm with you, but I worry when you're gone. I think I need to learn to love myself. I must learn to be strong. So for now we'll say goodbye. Although it pains me in my heart, your words, they come to me in memories. They sing to me like songs. It won't be long until I'm here. Soon I'll make my arrival under shady trees, a quiet street, the roads that I have traveled. Ultimately it's a beautiful thing, like flowers blooming in a lonely field. The petals drift through crossing winds that find their way to river streams that scent the water beautifully. It takes me back to you, it takes me back to you. A simple feeling that I can't seem to shake. Oh my love, you drive me crazy in the loveliest way. I stay up all night just thinking about the things that you say. I call your phone and hope to hear your voice, and all over again I am in love. Make me fall in love, why don't you just make me fall in love again? I can't deny it, I'm in love. I walk through this familiar scene with flowers blooming, sun that's shining through the leaves and the trees. Don't like to ask too many questions, hate to complicate things. So baby, won't you help me understand just what it means to be in love, in love, in love, in love. Oh, in love, I can't deny quiet, I'm in love. Don't remind me of the feelings as I break down. Don't remind me of the feelings that I got. Every day I see you clearly through a smoke screen.
Hey everybody!
Every day I see you, but I'd rather not.
Live tutorial stream. How's everybody doing?
Locked out, left my keys up in my other pants. Play it cool, but I can't keep this up. Stay the night at your place like it's nothing, man. In the summer air, it all just gets so hot. I go crazy. Got a couple drinks, what's up with you lately? Get a little close, I'm calling you baby. Start to run backwards, how do we get here? Timing ain't right, I'll call you back maybe. When it gets late, I can scoop you up. If it runs long, I can wait for you. I need a bottle to fill my cup.
Okay, so I actually have to pause it from there. There we go. Okay, now we should be music free. It should be just me now. So let's try that again. Thanks so much for hanging out with us here on the Beading Dream stream. This evening we've got our tribal coiled earrings. That is our project for this evening. This is one of my favorite ones. This is one of those projects that I literally don't have a sample because I can't keep a sample in stock. I typically sell them as soon as I make them. Tonight it's going to be tribal coiled earring because this is somewhat of a time-consuming project. So on our stream tonight we're going to have time to make one earring. The good news is the second earring goes together exactly like the first, so you can do the second one on your own time. So let's talk tools and supplies for this evening's tutorial. You're going to need your basic wire working tools. That's going to be a wire cutter, and you need to make sure you have one that handles heavy duty wire. For tonight's project, you're going to need a round nose pliers. That's the ones with the rounded barrels, and you're going to need a chain nose pliers as well. Those are the squishy ones. You're going to need either a bail making pliers or a couple of smaller dowels in the 1/4 to 1/2 inch size range. And that's, as far as tools go, that really is all that you need. You are going to need, okay, this bracelet is really loud. It's getting rejected from my wrist now. As far as supplies, you're going to need wire. You need actually, that wasn't even the loud one. Hold on, my wrists are way too loud. I need to make my wrists less loud.
That, you know.
Well,
as one does.
Yes, one does.
My
so
wrist
anyway,
has been loud before.
as far as supplies go, you're going to need 4 different gauges of wire for this evening's tutorial. So you're going to need 20 gauge, 16 gauge, 18 gauge, and 24 gauge. So your 16 gauge is going to be the frame, that kind of lyre shaped frame of your earring. Your 20 and your 24 gauge are going to be what actually makes your coil. Your 16 gauge is also going to make those 3 large jump rings that you see on the bottom of each earring, and then your 18 gauge is going to make the jump rings at the top. So let's go ahead and section off our wire. And again, I'm making one earring, just one single earring on stream today. So for a pair of earrings, you are going to need about 24 inches of 16 gauge. That covers enough to make your frame and make your large jump rings. You're going to need about 4 inches of 18 gauge. You're going to need about 16 inches of 20 gauge and about 60, that's 60 inches of 24 gauge. So for one earring, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut myself 8 inches of 20 gauge and 30 inches of 24 gauge to begin. So again, 8 inches of 20 and 30 inches of 24, and this is going to be for my initial coil. So the structure of this particular earring is basically it's a coiled coil that makes the cool decorative bit that is on the bottom. So I'm going to make a wire coil, and then I'm going to make my frame, and I'm going to coil that wire coil around my frame. So again, that was 8 inches of 20 gauge and 30 inches of 24 gauge. Also, apparently Heather is stripping in the background.
I am.
I mean, isn't that for the late night stream?
Yeah. Practice. Yeah. This was just for Carol.
Oh goodness. All right then. There's like private stripping going on behind me. I don't even know what to say about that. So I'm gonna find the center of my 24 gauge wire. So whenever you're making something that is coiled like this, you always want to have a thinner gauge of wire, which is actually going to be your coiling wire, and a thicker gauge of wire, which is going to be your core wire. So my 24 gauge is my coiling wire, and my 20 gauge is my core wire. And just as kind of a rule of thumb, you usually need at least 3 times as much coiling wire as you need core wire. So I'm going to take my 20 gauge core wire, and I'm going to find approximately the middle of it, and I can just eyeball that. And then I'm going to take the middle of my coiling wire, which I just found by folding it in half, and I'm going to put that crossways on my 20 gauge wire. So I've got my coiling wire going north-south, and my core wire going east-west. Then I'm going to hold that coiling wire firmly on my core wire, and I'm going to start coiling. So literally, I'm going to start winding one wire, the thinner wire, around the thicker wire, like so. Now, a couple of things. First of all, where you're holding it, where it starts, you're going to get these kind of, long spread out coils, and that's okay. We can unwrap those and we can fix them before we do the other end of the wire. We just want to make sure to hold everything nice and firmly, and then you want to do your level best to get these coils that you're making as close to each other as possible. Okay, so believe it or not, you do actually have control over this coiling process. You want to try and get the coils as close as possible. Now, that being said, when we coil this around our earring, our coils are going to spread a bit, and it's going to normalize out. So you can see that my coils are not 100% regular here. That's okay. Like, you can just let that be. You don't need to be too picky about that, but do your best to get everything as close together as you can. And I'm just going to keep coiling until I run out of wire on this side. So in order to keep those coils nice and tight, I'm taking my coiling wire and I'm pulling fairly firmly as I'm coiling around. So I'm, pulling in an outward direction. And just making sure to place each coil directly next to the coil that's prior to it. And once again, I'm just going to continue to coil till I run out of one of my 2 wires. So I want to make sure to leave a little bit on the end of my core wire. So if I come to the end of my core wire, then I'm just going to snip off what remains of my coiling wire. Alright, so I've come to the point where I've got about a 1/2 inch left on my core wire. So I'm going to go ahead and now flip this around and work on my other side. So all of this wire that's gotten kind of wrapped around my core wire that's not so pretty, I can just go ahead and unwrap that. And then I'm going to go ahead and work on the other side of my wire, coiling it up the other direction. And when you're doing this second side, just make absolutely sure that you're holding this side firmly enough that your wire actually is creating coils around the core, because what can happen fairly easily is if you're not holding this tightly enough, this already coiled side, your wire is just going to spin around and around and around your core, and it's not going to actually make any progress on the coils. And I'm just going to continue coiling until I've coiled up the entirety of this side of the wire as well. So it is, of course, a Saturday evening here in Dallas. That means it is Sips, Shopping, and Shenanigans night at the Beading Dreams. That means that after this tutorial, we will be back live at 7:30 p.m. Central Time with a live merchandise sale featuring more new merchandise. Also featuring the last of our January shaker and spoon cocktails, the Dublin After Dark. I did remember to bring lemons for that cocktail, so we should be good to go on the Dublin After Dark. We've got some fun African beads I think that we're going to have for you tonight, as well as other stuff. I'm not quite sure what, but lots of new things, so I haven't quite decided which ones I'm going to show on stream. So I'm going to continue to coil, again, until I reach the end of this wire or until I reach the end of this wire. So whichever wire runs out first is going to be your limiting factor here. Okay, and you want to be careful of this. That just happened to me when you're coiling. Okay, make sure you don't overlap your coils like I just did. So you really want to make sure that your coils wind up next to each other and not on top of each other. And then again, just continuing to coil until I've coiled up all of that. So yeah, Sips, Shopping, and Shenanigans tonight at 7:30 p.m. on the Beading Dreams stream. And then we've got some fun new classes for you guys next week. Should be a fun week of new tutorials. Okay, so what is becoming pretty clear to me right now is I did an absolutely terrible job of keeping this centered on my wire. I don't know if you can tell, but it's on one end. I've got ½ an inch of wire left, and I've got a solid 6 inches of my 24 gauge wire remaining. On the other end, I've got like 2.5 inches, and I've only got about 2 inches of my 24 gauge. So this is not an insurmountable problem. You can solve it fairly easily. You just have to be a little careful. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish coiling the wire that I'm currently working with. And when you get to the point where you can't really coil anymore with that wire, you're just going to go ahead and trim. And before I push down this pokey stabby end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the end where I've got less core wire but plenty of coiling wire that's still free, and I'm just going to hold that end with my chain nose pliers. I'm going to do my best to just slide this coil down towards that other end. Okay, so it's just moving down towards the other end. Now here's where the careful part comes in, because if you shove that too hard, you need to shove it right off of your wire. And then it's a bit of a pain in the butt to get it back on. So try not to shove it off of your wire. And then I'm going to take my pokey stabby end and press that down. And then I'm going to go back to my beginning side and just coil up the rest of this 24 gauge wire. So how was everybody's Saturday? Did y'all have a good Saturday? I got to work not one, but 2 birthday parties, which means that I've been in contact with a grand total of about 35 children today. Did y'all know that children in groups are really loud? Because I'd kind of forgotten that. Also, for those of you who are Americans, did you know that the 50 Nifty United States must be sung at the absolute top of one's lungs with extra emphasis placed on the state of Texas? Because I did not know this until this morning. And then I knew it a lot. Just saying. Hi, Tallyfet! Well, this is still the tutorial, so you haven't missed the sale. Okay, well, I'm not the only person who didn't know there was a 50 Nifty United States song, because apparently everyone learns it here in Texas.
I had no idea.
It's just us with our northern edumacation who are apparently deficient. Okay, so I slid it a little too far down now, so I'm not even. Like this has shrunken and this is too long, so I want to just slide it, my coil, a little the opposite direction. So my goal here is to have basically even ends there. And once again, I'm going to do 1 earring on stream tonight, so if you were doing this for a pair of earrings, you would repeat that with another piece of 24 gauge wire at 30 inches and another piece of 20 gauge wire at 8 inches. But I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to make my frame. So I'm going to grab my 16 gauge wire, and how big you make your frame really just depends on how big do you want your earring to be. For like a reasonably sized earring, not like a big ass Amy sized earring, but just a regular lyre sized earring, you're going to use about 4 or 5 inches of 16 gauge. So I'm going to go ahead and go with 4 inches. I lied. I'm going to go with 4.5 inches. So that's my 16 gauge, and that's what I'm going to use to make my frame. I'm also going to need a little bit of 16 gauge to make my large jump rings at the end of the project. And at this point, my 16 gauge wire is trying to escape and flee the scene, so I'm going to attempt to corral that. There we go. No wire escape. No. Okay. To form my frame, it's helpful if you have a larger dowel or a ring stick handy. If you don't, you can totally do it without, but it's going to give you a slightly more consistent shape if you have a tool to bend it around. So I'm just going to take my wire, my 16 gauge wire, and my ring stick. I'm going to position my wire centered on my ring stick, and I'm just going to bend it around, and ideally I want my 2 ends to be even, like so. Then apparently I throw it on the floor, because you know that's how we roll here on the Beading Dreams stream. That's all good. I know how to make another one.
That one? No.
It's okay. I just make another one. There's just an abundance of helpfulness here at the Beading Dreams.
We don't want to risk my shoulders being online.
It's true. People need to pay for those shoulders.
Right? Especially when I flex them.
So we're going to try and do this again without dropping it on the floor.
I can't afford it, so I'll cover my eyes.
Alright, so you're going to bend that around
No free shows for anyone.
your mandrel. Again, keep your ends as even as possible. And your goal is to have kind of a U-shaped component like this. You can hammer it if you want. I usually don't, but that's a personal choice. So if you wanted to hammer it, you absolutely could at this point. Now I'm going to grab my coil that I made. So this is, once again, my 30 inches of 24 gauge coiled around my 8 inches of 20 gauge. I'm going to find the middle of that coil. I'm going to go ahead and eyeball it. And I'm going to take the middle of my coil and I'm going to put it crossways over the middle of my frame. This should seem somewhat familiar. Now I'm just going to coil my coil around my frame. And once again, your starters are probably, hi Corvus, your starters are probably not going to look so good. That's totally fine. We can fix that and unwrap it when we go to wrap the other side, but I'm just going to go ahead and keep coiling my already coiled piece of wire around my frame. And so notice, as I do this, my coil is kind of progressing down my wire. Oh, that's true. We did get cawed at by one of Corvus's minions. I will say I don't think it's fair that she has the toads and the birds on her side. Like, what the heck? Not fair at all. Also, my microfleur press has shipped. It should be here Monday. Alright, so now that I've got to the end of this, that is a little bit too stabby for me to actually move with my fingers. So I'm going to use my pliers to just bring that around and snug that down against my frame. Like so. And then I'm going to go back to the center. I'm going to unwrap these weird looking coils and I'm just going to coil the other side. Keep us in check. That's no fun. Corvus has ears everywhere. Her minions. So while you're doing this, there's a really good chance that you're kind of deforming your U-shaped frame, and that's totally fine. It's pretty easy to put it back. Alright, so again, this is now too stabby for me to actually move with my fingers, so I use my pliers to snug that down around my frame. And once again, if you are making an actual pair of earrings, which typically earrings do come in pairs because ears typically come in pairs, you're just going to repeat that for your second earring. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make my large jump rings. And I will, depending upon my mood, I'll make these jump rings with my bail making pliers, and sometimes I'll make them with this size bail making pliers, which I'm going to do tonight. Sometimes I'll actually make them with the one size larger, which I'm pretty sure is what's in the photo. So as far as that goes, really it just needs to be big enough to go around this coil right here. So how do you make jump rings? You might be wondering. It's been a while since I had a tutorial. where I made my own jump rings. So how does one make jump rings? It's actually pretty easy and fun, I think. So I'm going to take about a 12-inch piece of my 16 gauge wire. For my pair of earrings, I would need to make 6 jump rings. Obviously for my single earring, I only need to make 3. And I'm going to take my bail making pliers, which are these guys. And bail making pliers are fun. They have these stepped cylindrical barrels, and what that does is that allows you to make a coil and have that coil be a consistent width. No, Windows, be nice. So I'm going to take my bail making pliers and I'm going to take my wire, my 16 gauge wire, I'm going to insert that into my bail making pliers, and then I'm just going to start coiling my wire around my pliers, and I'm just going to put each coil beneath the coil that's previous to it. And I'm just going to keep coiling until I've got a little bit more than 6 times around. Okay, if I'm going for 6 rings, I want to coil a little bit of extra because I am going to have to cut them. So now that I've got my coils, I'm going to take my wire cutters, and remember, whenever you're using a flush wire cutter, the flat side is the side that cuts flush. So I'm going to put the flat side towards my loop that's staying. I'm going to have my waist coming from the other side, and I'm going to trim. Then I'm going to flip my cutters around so that I can once again have my flat side towards the ring that I'm cutting. So in this scenario, the entire rest of this coil is waste, just as it relates to this one ring. Snip it, and there we go. And I just need to make 2 more, so I have my 3 rings. 2. And 3. Okay, so those are my 3 large jump rings. I'm going to use my chain nose pliers to make sure that those get closed up. Now, if I really wanted to make sure that they closed nice and securely, I could absolutely take a file and I could file that closure. But as long as I make sure the 2 edges are touching, since they're not going to be on anything particularly tiny, they're going to be on this, you know, large coiled portion of our earring, they should be okay just closed up like so. So that's 2. 1 more makes 3. And then I'm going to take these 3 rings and I'm just going to thread them onto my earring, and they're going to fall just to the bottom like so. Now I can take my, and once again, if you're doing a second earring, repeat for your second earring. Now I'm going to take my ends, I'm just going to sort of bend them a little bit so they overlap so I can get a nicer kind of teardrop shape to this. And then I get to decide how tall do I want this earring. I think this is actually a little taller than I want. So I'm going to chop off about 1/2 inch on either end of this, because I personally like this earring when it's not quite so long. So I just cut about 1/2 inch off from the end there, and then I'm going to take my round nose pliers, grab that 16 gauge wire, and just bend it around to make a loop like so. Exactly, cut them tips. So says Corvus. Alright, and then I'm going to take my 2 loops that I just made and I'm going to bend them in a little bit closer to each other. Wow, those loops are not even close to being the same size. We're going to ignore that. No, we're not. I can't ignore that. There we go. And then if you've got any wonkiness in your shape, you can just go ahead and use your fingers to sort of even it out. Alright, and then the last thing I have to do to make this into an earring is I need to make 3 jump rings for my top, and I need to make an ear wire. So my 3 jump rings that I use at the top are going to be 18 gauge. Why did I choose to use 18 gauge for those rings rather than 16 gauge? Mainly because It's easier to make 18 gauge jump rings than 16 gauge, and I don't really think you need to like have such bulk here at the top. So that means I'm going to take my 18 gauge wire and I'm just going to cut myself enough to make 3 rings. Again, if I'm making a full pair of earrings, that's going to be 6 rings. And I'm going to go one down. I'm going to go to this slightly smaller place on my bail making pliers, and then I'm just going to continue that same thing I did before with making the coil. And again, if I want 3 jump rings, I want to make about 4 or 5 coils because of the cutting that's going to happen. And then again, you're going to flush cut, flip around, flush cut the other side, and there's our ring. 2. And 3. All right, and then one of these, I want to make sure it is completely closed, like so. If you happen to have a large soldered ring lying around, you could also use that in place of this jump ring. Then I'm going to take one of my other rings that I just made. I'm going to open it up and I'm going to thread it through one of these loops on my earring that I just made, and I'm going to thread it through my closed jump ring as well, and then I'm going to close that. When I close it, make sure you feel your 2 sides scraping against each other so that you've got a nice securely closed ring. I nicked that with my cutters, that's what that is. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the other remaining rings. I'm going to open that up. Now when you do this, you just need to make sure a couple of things. Number 1, that you don't lose all of those big 16 gauge rings off of your earring like I almost did. And 2, that you don't connect your earring backwards. So I like to hold my 2 rings that I've already put on my earring like so, and then thread my large jump ring through that one at the top and then through the loop on my earring piece, and then close that up. And what should happen here is when you hold it with the top ring, it should fall nicely. So this shouldn't be all kind of twisted and wacky here at the top. It should just, you know, kind of want to hang nicely. And then the last thing that you need in order to have a functional earring, of course, is an ear wire. So I'm just going to go ahead and complete the process by making my own ear wire out of bronze wire. I don't need to make a particularly fancy ear wire because it's already a fancy earring, so no need to gild the lily, as it were. So I'm going to take my 20 gauge bronze wire and I'm just going to cut myself off 2 inches of it. It really doesn't take that much wire to make a basic ear wire. So I've got 2 inches of my 20 gauge bronze. Now typically if you're making an ear wire, 20 gauge is going to be your wire of choice. Interesting factoid, most commercial ear wires are actually made from, hi Simi, how's the life in San Antonio? Yeah, so typically if you're hand making ear wires, you will use 20 gauge. Most commercially manufactured ear wires are actually made from 21 gauge. So they are a little, yeah, so they're, the 20 gauge is just a little bit thicker than a 21 gauge would be, but for making ear wires from scratch, it's a good gauge. So I've got my 2-inch piece of 20 gauge wire, and I'm just going to start at the very end and roll around a small circle. Lori's catching Pokemon, that's awesome. Then I'm going to go back to my bail making pliers. I'm going to go to this second size and I'm going to roll my wire over that to make myself a hook. And I can adjust the height of this however long or not long I want my ear wire to be. This is actually a little long, so I'm going to trim it. And then personally I like to give my ear wire a little kick out at the end. And then since I don't really want to lacerate my ears when I put these wires in, I'm going to grab myself a file, an emery board, or a piece of sandpaper, whatever happens to be handy, and I'm just going to go ahead and file that end. So what you want to do is you just want to file the end to the point where it doesn't feel rough. And of course you need to smack your camera at least once or twice with your file, because that's what I do. Alright, there we go. So that's now filed down so it's not rough. And then I'm going to open up my loop, drop my single earring onto the loop like so, and then close it up. What do I smack if I don't have a camera? Well, I don't think Ace is sticking around to find out. That's all I have to say. Alright, so that is a single tribal coiled earring. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. Once again, if you're doing a pair of earrings, the second one goes together exactly the same as the first one. And this is a really great earring. Like I said, I never have a pair of these for myself because I always sell them right out of my ears as soon as I make them. Probably not this one since it doesn't have a mate, but as soon as I make a mate for it, it's probably going to be gone. So thank you all so much for hanging out with us on the Beading Dreams Saturday evening tutorial stream. Don't forget to tune in back on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream, in just half an hour or so for our 6th shopping and shenanigans sale featuring more new merchandise. You never know what kind of craziness is going to happen on the Saturday evening sales stream. So go ahead and grab yourself a cocktail, grab yourself a snack, get comfy, get cozy, get ready for some bead retail therapy in the comfort of your living room, office, or from wherever you are watching the Beading Dreams stream. I'm Allison from Beading Dreams in Dallas, Texas. We are an actual brick and mortar retail store. We're a small business. We appreciate your support so much, and hopefully we will see you all back on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream, for the sale in half an hour. If we're not going to see you for the sale, thanks for hanging out with us for the tutorial, and don't forget, we'll be back again on this same channel. Yes, that is twitch.tv/Beading Dream, Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. with a fun new tutorial. So hopefully we'll see y'all in half an hour. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Need a reason to stay with you, yeah. Gotta get back whatever I had, ignore the sign it too. We make believe something like a dream, but real life can't pick or choose. We set a goal, I guess we fell short, now I don't know what to do. No, no, no. You got something that you couldn't share with no one. Yeah, you got something, but you keep it under lock. I promised you I wouldn't turn it into something. I promised you, but I guess that wasn't enough. Don't remind me